So hello, everybody. My name is Laurie White, and I'm the president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. And this is episode number 182 of Chamber TV. And today, a very timely topic. We are talking about all the information, all the buzz around the inflationary environment that we are in right now. And actually, this is an unprecedented time in terms of inflationary forces. So the topic of today's presentation is tech as a deflationary force in an inflationary economy. And basically what it boils down to is understanding and getting a grip on the tools and the tricks and the hacks that each of us as business professionals can implement within our own business, within our own sphere of influence, if you will, to better manage and to better cope with what's going on in the external environment, and being able to take those ideas and be able to reinvigorate each of our businesses, no matter what's going on from an external point of view. And today we have two subject matter experts who will lead us through this interactive discussion. So we want to make sure that we are clear that this is interactive. We have a live audience. We're really excited that you're all here. You can weigh in at any time, ask questions. I'll be here as moderator, and we want to make sure that at the end of today's presentation, which is roughly an hour, all of your questions have been answered, and that we really bring out those key themes that each of us needs to walk away with some concrete action steps. So with that, let me introduce our two subject matter experts, our presenters. First is Todd Knapp, and Todd is the founder of Envision Technology Advisors. He's been providing IT services nationally for over 25 years, and he is a leader in the tech field. He is a contributor to a wide variety of executive boards and industry associations, charitable organizations, and the like. So truly a subject matter expert on business and technology topics, innovation, security, and digital culture. In addition, we have a second presenter today, our friend Anthony Mangiarelli, and Anthony is a partner and director of the Enterprise Solutions Group for KLR, and we know KLR as the largest CPA and business consulting firm in Rhode Island. Anthony is a certified public accountant, more than 20 years of experience. He advises many business owners on strategies to improve their organization's performance. He holds a BS in accounting and an MS in taxation from Bryant University. So both Todd and Anthony are veterans here on Chamber TV. We've had them presenting before. They are a wealth of knowledge. And with that, I will turn it over to Todd to get us going. So welcome, Todd.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie, as always, for having us. It's always great to be engaged with you guys. Are you all seeing the screen all right? All right, just making sure. All right, yeah, so we've got a riveting topic today. What's better like midday than taking a break from things and talking about technology and inflationary economy, and nothing but good news all around, yeah. If you find what we're talking about interesting and you want to stay in touch, I always love to hear from people. The very best way to get me is actually through Microsoft Teams, but you get me through Microsoft Teams with my email address. So guess what? You can use the same exact thing to email me. You can also find us on our social, envisionsuccess.net/ any one of these things will get you there. Anthony, and don't worry, you don't have to take photos of the screen. We're going to provide the deck to the chamber, and I'm sure that they'll distribute it to you. But Anthony, best way to get Anthony is via email, and by all means, he's got tons of free time, right, Anthony? You're not doing anything.
Todd, I'm not doing anything. We got two guys today, a technology guy and a guy with a master's in taxation. Let me tell you, it is going to be riveting. That's the right word.
Love it. So yeah, call Anthony a lot because he's got nothing to do and he loves it when I tell people to do that. So you can also obviously find KLR through their website or through their social as well. So I'll echo what was said by Laurie a few minutes ago. Please, if you've got questions, post them into the chat. We're very interested to hear your questions along the way. We've got somebody monitoring that. Hopefully we'll we'll be able to get to everyone's questions throughout the course of the day here. So we're talking about technology as a deflationary force in an inflationary economy. First things first, you have to know that that is not Todd language, that is not Envision language, that is not Anthony language. Those words were first spoken, to my knowledge, by Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. He was talking about the trends that he sees coming over the next several years. This was just a few months ago at Microsoft Ignite, and it was one half of one sentence at the very beginning of the conference where he had said, you know, technology is a deflationary force in an inflationary world. And it really got me thinking, and I came away thinking, well, we could have a whole conversation just about that. I am a technologist, but I am also a business leader. I founded my company. I've been doing it for over 20 years. My company continues to grow. So like a lot of you that are business owners on this call, you know, I'm getting nothing but good news in my email from Anthony, my CPA, and from economists and business professionals around the globe. Everyone is telling me that the trends and the forecasts are all going the wrong way. And so I wanted to be able to talk to you about how technology can help you combat that. But I'm not the right guy to talk about the financial piece. So I'm going to hand that to Anthony. I asked him to come and lend some credibility to the conversation. So Anthony, tell us what you see. What's going on economically in the United States and globally today?
Sure. Thank you, Todd, and thank you to the Chamber as well as Laurie and Janet. You know, it's interesting. So here at KLR, we're a family of companies, including CPA firm, an executive search group, wealth management, outsourcing, technology with Envision. So we really are very advisory, and we work with thousands of clients nationally, internationally, and locally. So as Todd said, your inbox is full of such great news, and I see we've got a few snippets here on the screen. Nationally, we're hearing recession coming 2023. Everybody's seeing inflation is higher than anyone can recall. We're hearing consumer debt and credit card balances are up. The stock market, obviously, if you've looked at your retirement accounts, is down, which is interesting because if you look at some of the prices today on some of the well-known stocks, they're actually lower than they were in March of 2020 when we thought the world was essentially coming to a slow end. And some of the technology companies, and this is about technology, the valuations are still very, very high. So that's kind of the national trends. But so what really matters is we want to know what's happening more locally, New England based. And so we've been talking to a lot of our clients as we do year-end planning, and what we're hearing locally is that, supply chain is still an issue. It's been corrected somewhat, but, with the issues going on in Russia, there's still some, call it intrinsic commodities that can't be obtained or are still high valued. So that's putting a strain there. We're still hearing that employees, those that are experienced, skilled workers, are very hard to come by. And I can tell you that our executive search group last year had their best year ever. And because finding talented people is probably one of the greatest challenges across all industries that we're still hearing. When you get into the specific industries, I can tell you consumer goods, we've talked to a lot of those companies that are already seeing the slowdown. The holiday orders are not there. I've talked to 3 this week. One is in the household goods field, one's in the kitchen supplies field, and another's in the jewelry industry. And they're all saying, hey, we've had our greatest years the last 3 years because everybody was sitting home, buying everything they needed online. And now they don't need anything. So they're not purchasing consumer goods. The issue with that is not only do those companies suffer, but then it kind of goes back through the supply chain. And these are not supply chains that are struggling with finding some of those issues we talked about with what's going on in the Eastern Europe. So you'll see that slowdown move through the supply chain. Professional services and call it blue collar machine shops, still struggling to find experienced people. 2 very different industries. Their growth is constrained because they can't find enough people. And one of the things Todd's going to talk about is outsourcing and using technology, because that's a way to be able to balance some of this growth without hiring human capital. Last industries that are pretty interesting for, restaurants. Everybody's like, oh, restaurants had a tough year through the pandemic. Yeah, they did all right because they could do takeout, but they weren't getting the bar revenue or the fountain drink revenue. So they didn't have a lot of profits. They had a lot of revenue, but no profits. And now as the world kind of reopens, they can't get people. So they can now get people into their locations to eat and use the bar and buy fountain drinks, which are highly profitable, but they can't get people to serve or managers to run the restaurants. And the other interesting thing is call it the food industry. Do a lot of work with food companies, and you go to the supermarket and you see your costs are way up. The issue with that is a lot of those food companies are locked into contracts with their customers. And so while their prices have gone up from their vendors, they haven't been able to pass those on in 2022 at the clip that inflation's been rising. So a lot of those food companies don't have the profits, and everybody keeps saying, well, the food industry is doing well. I can tell you, I've talked to 3 food companies this week. They all do between 10 to 40 million in revenue, and the revenues are still there, but the profits are non-existent. So that's kind of the world that we live in. And 2 other concepts that we hear about is, one, we're cautiously optimistic about 2023. But as Todd said, there's a lot of negative news. The other thing we're hearing a lot is that cybersecurity is one of our biggest concerns as we go into the new year. And I know Todd's going to hit on that today, but I wanted to say that that's something we're hearing on the financial side when we talk to people is, I'm really nervous about cybersecurity. So Todd, I'll kick it back to you. That's what we're hearing locally.
Thanks. And, I think you're right. I think it's, I've obviously had these conversations with you many times before, and I know you and I share a bunch of customers that we work with. I had one client that during the pandemic grew from 160 million in revenue to 280 million in revenue. Literally, in 1 year, they doubled the company almost. It was substantial growth. And when I was talking to them, I said, what keeps you from, why 280, why 280? Why not 380? Why not 480? And they said, well, it comes down to available talent. It's not that we didn't have the orders, it's we didn't have the people, and we're not going to take orders that we can't fulfill. And so I thought that was telling. And so a lot of we talked about technology as a deflationary force. There are a lot of ways to approach that. Obviously the first is, as you were beginning to allude to, Anthony, is, look, can we increase our ability, our capacity with the people and the resources we've already got by reducing the amount of labor required to produce whatever goods and services our company provides. And that might be reclamation of time that's not leveraged by automation. That's one possibility. It could also be applying new technologies to the automation process, to the manufacturing process. Manufacturing 4.0 is all about reimagining how we produce goods in a manufacturing environment. In a services business or in retail, it translates to other things. And a good example, an interesting and regional example, frankly, that occurred way before the pandemic, is Stop and Shop. We've all been to Stop and Shop, and they have, right when you walk in the door, as soon as you walk in, you've got the scanners right there. What a wonderfully brilliant solution to reclaim available time from their people, right? Instead of them spending as much time doing checkout, they can spend other time doing other things. It's not necessarily about reducing the number of people in an organization. It's about freeing up the highly skilled time that you've got available by reducing the amount of rote work that people do. And we spend a mountain of time at Envision focusing on that for our own people, is what are the things we could automate internally that are going to reduce the amount of data entry or, hunting through tickets for, a resolution for our customers. How do we automate as much of that as we can? I know, Anthony, you were telling me a story, I think yesterday, about KLR and automation. Do you want to tell it real quickly? Can I impose on you?
Sure. Which one, Todd? You want
The
to?
tax return, the big tax return.
Okay. So, this is an interesting one. This is, I had a former client reach out. He moved to the West Coast 10 years ago. And he's now in his 80s, and he called up and he said, "Hey, I'm moving back to the East Coast because the costs are just too expensive in retirement here on the West Coast. And while the weather's good, I want to come home." And so he said, I want you to do our tax return again." And I said, "Okay, now this is a really big tax return. I mean, it's, let's use big numbers. Let's say we're going to charge the gentleman $5,000 to do his tax return. It's a big tax return." And so I said to him, "Well, we haven't seen your tax return in 10 years. I'm going to need a copy of it to look at it." And he said, "Okay, where do I send it?" And I said, "Well, you can, I'll give you the address." I said, AMangiarelli@conlitwin.com. And he said, "What is that?" I said, "That's my email address." He said, "I don't do email. I don't do anything technology." Now, mind you, this is a world-renowned doctor. He's in his 80s. He doesn't do technology. He says, "Where do I physically mail the tax return to?" So I have to give him our 951 North Main Street address. And about a week later, a package shows up. And it's this big package, and it's all last year's tax return that looks like a phone book. And so we have scanning technology now, which we didn't have years ago. We scan the tax return in, and we get a copy of it. And it also uploads into our tax software. And so, I quoted it and I said, "We're going to do the tax return for him." And I had a really nice conversation with him. Very interesting to talk to him. And I assigned the tax return to one of our staff to do it. Well, after tax season, they said, "I don't want to work on that client anymore." And I said, "What do you mean you don't want to work on that client? Was there an issue? He's a really nice gentleman." "Oh, he's great. I love talking to him on the phone." And this is a younger staff in their 20s. They said, "But I can't work like this." I said, "Well, what do you mean you can't work like that?" They said, well, I have to call him on the phone and get him an open items list. And then I don't hear from him for a week. I get the item. There's an issue. I have to call him back. Everything's getting mailed here. I've got to go to the mailbox. Well, I'm working from home today. It sat in my mailbox for an extra day. And, and it's just, I can't work like this. And I said, you don't realize that 20 years ago, that's how we did tax returns. That's how we communicated. That's the process. And it made me occur. I was telling Todd, I said, I realized just all the technology that's changed the game for how we do our job, and how much more efficient it is, because this tax return probably sat here for 8 weeks from the time we got the information to go out the door, just because the back and the forth, as opposed to now, our clients key certain data right in to an online platform, or they just scan us and send us an email with their tax data. And something that now takes 2 days takes 6 weeks. And it was interesting talking to somebody who never experienced that, because they're like, "He's a really nice person. I really enjoy talking to him. I just can't work like this because it's not something I'm used to doing." So Todd, that was the story. I hope that's the same one.
No, it's the exact same one. And I take two things from it. And you tell me if I'm wrong. You keep me honest here, right? Number one, when I hear you tell that story, what I hear is, here's a great potential customer with a larger than normal potential fee because it's a big return, but it's possible that might actually be less profitable than a much smaller return would be, because now we've got to do a whole bunch of stuff manually and our cost of delivering just went up. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Second is, I hear that we have a great customer that somehow is now potentially a morale problem for the employee base in a market where finding talented employees is really difficult, where everybody's hunting, and where it's not actually all that hard to change jobs.
You hit
Fair?
the nail on the head, Todd. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and so when we talk about technology as a deflationary force, one of the items in there is reduction of the operational costs associated with turnover. And we'll come back to this data intelligence thing in a minute, but I mean, it feeds right into this next slide, which is, some stats that I grabbed off of the Microsoft Work Trend Index from 2022. A Harvard Business Review was actually a 2021 study. 77% of employees will look for a new job if they're not provided the tools or technology or the information that they need to do their job. More than 3/4 of your employees are at risk if you can't provide them with good technology. Because the reality is that if somebody's really good at doing their job and they've got 7 things that they do professionally, and nobody has 7 things, I'd kill to have only 7 things. If you could have an employee that had 7 items that they were supposed to do for their job on a routine basis, and doing 3 of those is incredibly difficult because of the tools that you didn't provide, or the technology that you didn't provide, or the automation that you didn't lean into, they can change jobs for the same money. And I mean, the reality is that in the market it is today, you're fighting a world where probably they can change jobs for more money. But even if not, even if they can't, if they change jobs for the same money, they can do the same job with the same level of effectivity in less time and with less hassle, which leads to a better quality of life for them. Not providing the technology puts you at risk of high turnover. Would you agree, Anthony?
I would.
I'm pointing at you over here because on my screen you're on my right-hand side. So,
it is interesting because especially now with the working from home environment, people are logging into they're logging into a system, and it doesn't matter if they're logging into your system or your competitor down the street. If somebody offers them $5,000 more, they become a mercenary because you've lost that connection in the office. And if they are being frustrated with the technology systems, they're going to make a move because that's their day. They're sitting at their house. They go to log in. If there's an issue and they can't get in, they get frustrated.
Man, you are singing my song, because honestly, when I was reading the work trend index, and the Microsoft work trend index is really fascinating. If you've never seen it, Google it. For everybody on the call, it's really fascinating. They do it every year. There's several years back you can go and look at through the pandemic that were really enlightening. But the big middle box in here I thought was interesting, because something that a lot of you on the call wouldn't know about me is that I am a living, breathing 45-year-old psychology experiment. My father is a behavioral psychologist, and so I was a living experiment my whole life. But I grew up with a focus and a fascination on human behavior and how we perceive the world and how we think about the world. And so the question in the work trend index was around clarity. Employees who report having clarity on their work priorities are, and then you can read the stats there, right? I actually think that the fascinating thing in a hybrid work world is that when you were early in your career, if everybody thinks, some of you may already be early in your career, maybe right now. Some of us, we have to think back a little ways. When we were early in our career, we looked to the people in the office around us, and we observed the way that they interacted with colleagues and the way that they dressed for work and the way that they took calls with clients. We overheard things. We learned a lot osmotically in the office. In a hybrid work world, some of that has been lost. We've gained some things too. I mean, interestingly, and I'm not sure it's always a good thing. In fact, I'm 100% confident it's not always a good thing. People actually tend to work longer hours in a work model than they did in the office. We don't have to commute in, so we start work a little earlier. It can be tricky. But I think that the thing about the word clarity is that clarity on work priorities suggests that they're clear on the tasks that they're required to do in their job. But actually, the biggest priority at Envision, and I know it's true at KLR too, is how we interact and service our customers, right? And that priority can only be learned culturally. And so, having the right technology and tools to help make sure that the culture of the business is propagated even to employees who aren't going to physically be in the office every day is central to ensuring that people feel that sense of clarity. Does that make sense, Anthony?
It does.
I always ask the accountant if it makes sense, because if I say something technology and the accountant guy understands it, I know I'm good.
Todd, can I jump in and ask a
Please,
question?
hit me.
So what technology and what tools specifically do you think answer the call to this dilemma?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Is that our next slide? It might be our next slide. It's a couple slides out, but we'll get there. So You might have noticed a very informal conversational model here, but for me, Envision adopted Microsoft Teams way before the pandemic. We actually adopted the product about 6 months after it came out. Some companies use Slack. That's fine too. But whatever you're using, I don't know how many companies I've had this conversation with where I say, hey, what's the company's line on whether or not you require employees to be on camera, right? Every interaction at Envision happens on camera. More than 70% of all communication is body language. When I talk to my staff, you'll notice I'm standing right now. I have a standing desk. I'm standing while I'm talking to you guys, not because I was in the mood to stand, but because you're getting so much more from my body language like this. I don't ever do a meeting with my staff, like a full staff conversation where I'm sitting in a chair. I'm always on my feet. I'm animated. I'm talking. I'm engaged with them. Right? That's one of the ways that we convey culture electronically. We also use tools like Microsoft Praise to call out our employees digitally when they're being successful. Because one of the things that used to happen is we used to say, hey, Anthony, thank you so much for that great advice you gave. Guys, did you know that Anthony saved my butt yesterday with a client? I was going to do this webinar for the chamber and I was going to have to talk about accounting things and I'm not an accountant, and Anthony jumped in and made it fabulous. I can call him out publicly, particularly when we're in person. It's harder to do electronically and it's very difficult to do in a chat type model where you're posting into a channel. But something like Microsoft Praise lets you call people out specifically to say, great job. Right? So there are a lot of tools, and we can talk more about that later. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but there's a whole lot of technology out there that you can bring to bear to help narrow the distance between your hybrid workers and your in the office workers. Even things as simple, Laurie, as redesigning your conference rooms with the right technology so that when you have a meeting and you've got some people in the room and some people that are hybrid, there's really no functional difference, that it's inclusive for everybody in a meaningful way. So many organizations don't have that basic piece of setup in place. And so the people that are on as hybrid workers are at some level orphaned from the culture of the business and the conversation and the interactions in the meetings. Does that make sense? I know you asked a simple question and there's a big answer. Another element here that we have to consider in the hybrid work world too was this one on the left. 76% of employees say they'd stay longer if they could benefit from more learning and development support. I don't know about you, Anthony, but I mean, you're a mentor, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentored employees for decades in person. Harder to do in a hybrid world. There's a bigger emphasis on formal education and organizational learning management systems now than there has ever been. There is technology available to help harness all that tribal knowledge in your company and put it into a place where people can consume it on demand when they want to and when they're ready to, which frankly is the way that this youngest generation learns anyway. So anyway.
Todd, one thing I'd say on that, so just so that the world is aware that when you are a CPA, on an annual basis, you need to get 40 hours of continuing education. And going back years ago, you'd have to physically go somewhere to sit physically in a location and learn from an instructor. And two things happen with that. One, you were kind of constrained by the physical location of who the instructor was and what they were teaching, because you might have wanted to learn something, but there wasn't a course locally. And two, it was, call it price disruptive to send 100 people to a seminar, physically send them out for the day. We've internally created what we call KLR University, and we have a whole platform and structure now where we have national speakers come in the new environment we're in and present online, as well as we have folks internally present. And the platform is all done through technology where I can go to a course catalog, literally check I want to attend that, and it pops up on my calendar. I'm logged in, I get the invite. It's all through, Teams. We didn't have that years ago. It's become much more efficient, and it helps us get our 40 hours and actually get value out of it because, we can go and see the session we actually are interested in as opposed to what's physically able to be presented locally.
And it's such a great use case too, Anthony. I mean, by investing in that technology and branding it internally and leaning in to that hybrid educational model, it doesn't just provide the employees with the education they need, it but gives them the opportunity to pursue that education collaboratively together. And that osmotic learning begins to happen again.
And the
Great
cost,
stuff.
you're right. The cost was expensive in year one, but we're using that now every year. We're probably on, year 5, 6 on that. And there's costs to upgrade or maintain each year the technology, but it's a long life cycle, and we're going to use that for probably decades.
Awesome. So on the subject of cost, one of the things that I am always cognizant of as a business owner is the value conversation. What's the value, right? And anyone who's ever had to price something had to have that internal discussion with themselves. What will the market bear? What are my competitors doing? And what's concerning to all of us, I think, and anyone is welcome to chime in and correct me. Any of you can do that. Feel free to hit the unmute button and just chime in if you like. But I think one of the things that we all think about is, well, in an inflationary economy where organizations become incredibly price conscious because their margins begin to narrow, there's this increased sense of importance on price. But that's only really a thing if you are in a commodity industry and your industry is being commoditized by your regional competitors, and you are at the same time offering the same thing that everybody else offers, right? Differentiation is how we increase value. So if I'm doing something very unique and incredibly valuable to Laurie, and nobody else in the market is doing it that way, there's an opportunity for me to at least maintain my current pricing and margin structures as the economy tightens, because I'm providing new and better value. Potentially, I could even charge a little more. And so, I was thinking about that, and I thought I would just point this out real quickly. Divi is a credit card company. If you are a credit card company, you're in the business of providing credit cards to businesses, and what you're looking to do is earn that 3% transactional fee every time something happens, that's how you make money. You're in a race to the bottom. That credit card market is heavily saturated. People are competing on rates and cashback and zero interest programs, which are essentially eating into the margin of the company, right? It's a commodity. Nobody wants to pay more just for a credit card. I can get a credit card anywhere, right? So this company, Divi, which was actually founded by Bill.com, or rather they're owned by Bill.com. I guess I don't know for sure that they founded them. Maybe they acquired them. Don't quote me on that. I know that'll be the one thing in the comment section. They were not founded by. So Divi took a whole different approach. They said, look, we want that 3% transaction fee, but the way we're going to get it is we're going to be a software company. And they built a platform where I, as a user, a business owner, can issue a credit card to every single employee if I want to. And right from the mobile app, I can apply budgets to every individual credit card. I can create an unlimited number of virtual credit card numbers, which I did, because you know what? I'm a technologist. I'm all over the internet. My information is like everywhere. And I've got a million things for my business that transact electronically and online. And so one of the bigger disruptive things that can occur in my company would be for one of our credit card numbers to be compromised. And now when we get that card canceled and replaced, we have to now update 50 or 100 or more online services that we rely on to run our business, cloud platforms and everything else in the world. I can create an unlimited number of virtual cards right in the app and apply those virtual cards and say, okay, anytime this card is used, automatically apply the transaction on my balance sheet here. And so two things have happened. One, if somebody compromises a card number, one of my virtual card numbers, I just delete it and replace it. I don't even need to call the credit card company. I can just delete it and replace it in the app, and I'm only impacting that one service, not all of the services. Number two, I'm reducing the amount of workload on my financial team. I'm making it possible for them to spend less time, and I'm saying I'm making it possible. They actually brought this tool to me, but by adopting this tool, the business has we've made it possible for them to spend less time categorizing expenses off of credit cards, and we do a lot of transactions there. Third, I've made it easier for my employees to have access to a card. If I wanted to issue all of my guys who may potentially be on a plane going to a client site on the other side of the country to do a project, if I wanted to give them all a business card and have all of them set to a budget of 0, they're unusable until one of them is traveling, and now I just apply a budget to it and off they go. Done. Seconds, right? Very, very cool, powerful technology. But again, they built this because they wanted to be in the business of credit cards. They wanted to be in a business that was a commodity market. And since launching their virtual credit card platform, year-over-year increase in virtual card usage has averaged 283% increase year over year. It's a great example of a company changing the game. Does that make sense to you, Anthony?
It does. It does. I'm glad you brought up Bill.com, because for those that aren't aware, Bill.com is another interface that, and Todd, I'm going to become a technologist here. Optical character recognition. Is that what OCR stands for?
Yes. Optical character recognition. Look at you.
I've learned a thing or two over the
years. I'm going to
years.
mail it to you, buddy.
So those that don't know, Bill.com is an interface where you can, instead of when you think of the old way of accounting for transactions, you get your invoice from your vendor, you key it into your accounting package, you then write a check, and then the check goes off. What Bill.com is, you can now upload the PDF or have it sent directly to Bill.com. You have one unique account with Bill.com, and what happens is you get an interface where you can approve payments. Bill.com will pay the invoice for you, and on the back end, it will identify if it's mapped properly. It will identify to whatever your accounting package is, if it's QuickBooks, to the right expense line item, so you automatically get updated on a daily basis. And why I think I bring it up is it kind of goes to what we've been talking about, leveraging a technology where instead of having an accountant on staff that's more data entry, you now have an office administrator on staff who can leverage this technology in Bill.com to kind of do the accounting, and the value dollars that you pay your accountant is to kind of review and give you advisory services now, as opposed to just data entry. So there's another interface there of technology based on Divi.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is that my company has doubled. And over the years, if you go back to when we were half the size that we are now, we had the same size team in our finance group. The reason that we haven't had to add significantly to our finance group, and the reason that that team is still able to produce new value for our customers on a regular basis. In the last year, they've launched online payment portals. They've changed how we bill electronically to automate a lot of the monthly charges that we send to our clients. The reason we've been able to do those things is because that team understands the value of automation. That team understands the value of leveraging technology to take some of those rote tasks away. We were early Bill.com adopters too. So yeah, it's a phenomenal example. So Laurie, you asked a question earlier about what are the specific tools available for change. Part of the message that I wanted to drive home to everybody today is that the odds are that most of the people on this call already have the tools they need in order to pursue optimization of business and push back on inflation, on an inflationary economy through automation and through productivity that can be brought in by technology. If you are a Microsoft 365 customer today, there are more than 160 applications in that suite of technologies that you're probably already licensed for and maybe aren't using. I mentioned things like Microsoft Teams earlier. One of the companion products for Teams is a platform called Viva. And a very good example, we had a customer that had about 300 employees. They had a very large investment in an intranet that nobody used. And they were trying to figure out how to get a more bi-directional communication, get a conversation going with their employees. And so I heard a lot of things in the initial meeting. One of the things I heard was, our intranet doesn't have the adoption we'd like it to have. How do we change the intranet to have better adoption? And my conversation was, if you want the intranet to work really well, get rid of the intranet. It's a really legacy approach to communication. Intranets are this thing where we take all this organizational knowledge and we place all that organizational knowledge off to one side in the business in a platform that nobody uses on a day-to-day basis, right? And so it's sort of like saying, oh, in your normal job, I want you to walk down this trail every day. And by the way, we're going to put this one map for the trail that you're on way off the side. You're going to have to leave the trail, go through the river, up the hill, through the briars, and you're going to find this great thing. Intranets are not in people's line of sight. So they generally don't get the adoption that people would like to see. But something like Microsoft Viva lets me take the information that would otherwise be in an intranet and put it in people's line of sight directly in Microsoft Teams where they're working every day. And so the data gets more consumption, and the business gets more engagement, and the conversation becomes more bi-directional. After a redesign of this company's Teams environment, a deprecation of their intranet, and an integration of the content into Viva and some other tools, within 3 months, the top post in Teams had 14 times the number of views and engagement of the best post from the prior 3 years in their intranet. It's a really powerful way to look at employee engagement. In personal efficiency, we've all used tools like OneDrive and SharePoint and Planner. These are things that are already in the Microsoft 365 platform. And I know, Anthony, you're using Teams today at KLR, yes?
We are.
Yes, you are. And I know you and I were just talking about OneDrive the other day. And I know you guys are still early into that process, but you're engaging in being able to do things like sharing and collaborating in real time on files through OneDrive. But I'm betting that you've never heard this terminology right here all the way to the right of the slide. Have you ever heard the term Power Platform?
I haven't. I thought the case study you're talking about was us. I mean, based on what you were saying about the internet, 300 people.
It wasn't, but I'm glad you had the same experience. No, so Power Platform is terminology that I think very few people have actually heard, but it is a suite of technologies inside Microsoft 365. Remember I said earlier, we're going to come back to that data and analytics thing? Microsoft Power BI, that's a term I bet you've heard. Yes, Anthony?
I have.
Yeah, everybody's heard that term. So Power BI is business intelligence. So can we take data that the organization already has, ingest it into a tool, and get better value out of it? What you probably haven't heard is all these other things, Power Apps and Automate and virtual agents and pay. You know what? It doesn't matter. No one on this call is here to become an IT professional. What I want to draw your attention to, though, are things like this, AI Builder. Did you know that you subscribed to artificial intelligence for $40 a month when you got your Microsoft, E5 subscription? Almost every company on this call, I would bet, is using 365. That means all of you have access to artificial intelligence builder. And if this isn't technology that NASA's using and isn't available to anyone else, this isn't a Fortune 500 company. They've been Fortune 500 technology. They've been doing this for a decade. This is Microsoft saying, hey, the world of artificial intelligence should be democratized. Everybody should have access to it in a subscription for $50 a month or $40 a month or whatever it is you're paying every month, right? You already own this technology. You've probably never heard the term Dataverse. This is an underpinning technology that allows you to take data from all over your organization, centralize it, and engage with it in custom apps, custom automations. Power Virtual Agents are custom AI-enabled natural language chatbots. So instead of having to type in a specific request of a chatbot, you can just put it in plain English and it knows how to interpret it, right? So there's an incredibly huge innovation engine underneath the tools you already own that you're probably not using. And so this investment in this, lean into this in the next 3 years to combat what the economy is going to do. This is how you'll bring new value to clients. This is how you'll bring new value to customers. It's how you'll bring new value to your own employees and reduce employee turnover. This is how we fight. I mentioned earlier that this isn't new ground. Anthony, I think you would agree that it's, leading edge, not bleeding edge, right?
No, Todd, it isn't, and it does, as we go through all this, one of the things that we've done as a firm to overcome the talent shortages, we've started hiring people outside of New England. And I can tell you that utilizing a lot of these softwares, specifically Teams, and utilizing the right way, we've probably got a dozen people in Florida alone remote employees. And what we hear from them is, I've never felt more connected to a firm, even though I'm thousands of miles away. And, so what you're saying is true about the engagement and using these platforms properly.
That wasn't anecdotal, right? Right? I mean,
No.
that wasn't you making a point. That comment, if I'm not mistaken, actually happened like a week ago. One of your Florida employees specifically made a point to call out how great the engagement has been.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's utilizing, that's why I was joking when I said, I thought maybe you're talking about us with the internet, because, I know you've helped us get up on Teams, and it's, utilizing it properly. We've had a lot of success.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And one of the things I tell clients all the time is that, the Fortune 500 often are a decent yardstick for the things that we should be all thinking about 2-3 years from now. They've been doing this for a while. Power Platform, if I had Fortune 500 companies on the call right now, there'd be nobody that hadn't heard that term. They would know the term Power Apps, right? 97% of them are already using this technology. I mean, you can see the stats right here. The one that I care about most is the 7.4 million developers that are building in these platforms today. When one of the big, if you had been on a call with me, Anthony, or you were, you think back 10 years ago, I think I actually stood in the front of the executive team at KLR once and said, don't build custom software, right? I said it very emphatically, like, you don't want to become a software company and adopt all that life cycle management and updating code and securing code and all the things that go with building custom applications. Today, I never say that. Power Platform lets me build custom applications for clients every day that have no underlying code base that we manage. Microsoft is handling that. Their team of thousands of cybersecurity professionals are handling that. They're making it possible for me to automate workflows without having to write software that becomes technical debt. Very, very powerful stuff, this.
Hey, Todd and Anthony, some breaking news. Just watching Bloomberg, and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell just signaled that the pace of interest rate increases is likely to slow next month when they meet. So we know that traditionally it's been like 75 basis points. We've seen a 400 basis point hike over the last year or so, but he just said likely to slow. However, borrowing costs will need to continue to keep rising to remain restrictive for some time to beat inflation. So some good news, but also, to reinforce your point that inflation is still going to continue to be something that the Fed is tackling in ways to, really tame that. So that's hot off the press just a few moments ago.
For those of you that are not tremendously impressed by this, please know that Laurie and Anthony and I coordinated with the Fed to make sure that information was released during this webinar, because that's the kind of clout we all have.
Well, I have to say, don't forget, Jerome Powell was our guest at the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce annual meeting a couple of years ago. So
absolutely true.
We're always dialed in to what the Fed chair has to say.
So thank you, Laurie. And, on the subject of costs going up, although it's not specifically inflationary, I would argue that it is by virtue of the fact that the annual amount spent every year on cybersecurity breach has only been increasing for the last 10 years. There is nothing more expensive to a small business than contending with a data breach. And one of the things I expect to have happen as the economy it creates increasing pressure on businesses is that companies that have invested probably not enough in cybersecurity are likely to take their foot off the gas even a little more in the wake of challenging economic conditions, and we're going to see a rise in the number of cyber breaches and data loss. If you can even imagine that, it's at unprecedented levels already. These are some of my more interesting numbers. This year. So right now, this second, every 14 seconds globally, there is a cyber attack. That's how many are happening every day. Every 14 seconds, there's a new cyber attack. There were globally $6 trillion spent up to August of this year They're saying it'll be about 8.7 trillion by year end. Money spent just recovering from data breach. There are the average cost for an SMB to recover from a data breach is $2.2 million. Now, I work with lots of agencies that bring me clients because they've had a breach. Some of the, one of the breaches I saw this year was a 42-person company. The initial ask from the person that compromised them was 3.7 million. They negotiated it down to 2.2. So right on that number, that's not recovery. That was the ransom. Their full recovery will be closer to $3 million. But the number on this screen that freaks me out the most is the one in the lower left. It costs $1 a month for you to subscribe to a hacking toolkit from a legitimate software hacker that will build you the tools you need to compromise a company. And basically you pay $1 a month to get the toolkit. And then from there, you pay a portion of the ransom that you get back to the original coder. There is a supply chain for hacking software. It's incredible. And Anthony, you and I had an experience with this year, yeah?
We did. I received a phone call on a Sunday morning from a CEO who said, I don't know what to do. I just tried to log into our system and it's completely locked out, and we got hit with Lockbit 2.0, and we've got some hackers looking for some funds to unlock things, and I don't know where to turn. And I said, I'll get you Todd. And about 45 minutes later, we had Todd on the phone with him. And the interesting thing with that was, yeah, they were locked out of their system, and they couldn't invoice, they couldn't collect money, they couldn't pay bills. But they were also a med tech company, and they had some FDA issues. They couldn't track some of their FDA reporting. And I know, Todd, when you spoke with them, I mean, they were pretty much at one point just saying, we should probably just shut down and go bankrupt.
Yeah. That was one of the first conversations I had with a company that was really in that position. I mean, some of them have joked about it, but that company was really seriously in the, do we need to just close our doors? We can't afford this. We're not going to survive this. And, roughly like a 50-person company, ballpark, not a huge business, but with the kind of money it was going to take to pay the ransom because they didn't have adequate backups that were cyber hardened, and with the money it was going to take to do the restoration that wouldn't be recovered because it didn't have cyber liability insurance, it was a pretty bad scene for that company. So yeah, it's a big scary world out there. Well, listen, I know we've only got 4 minutes left, so I'll wrap up on these couple of thoughts around cyber risk, because I didn't want to end the conversation without really touching this in a big way. All the things I talk about around Microsoft Teams and automation and using technology to robotic process automation, AI, all that stuff, those are cloud-centric technologies. As a technologist, I can't in good conscience call Anthony and say, hey, do you mind if I take a lot of the intellectual property of the firm and data that might be really customer sensitive and put it out there, so I can leverage cloud tools and not secure it? I can't do anything for you from an automation and a leverage point of view without first securing your environment. And so my guidance to you is this: I'm not going to try and teach everybody what's on this slide. We could do a whole 2 webinars just on this thing. But the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is the framework that everybody uses, or most organizations use, to protect themselves, to look at their organization and say, hey, are we cyber resilient? If you've never heard the term NIST, if you've never had somebody taking you through this is just the core cybersecurity framework and saying, hey, let's look through your identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover sections and talk about where our gaps and weaknesses are. If this is new information to you, if nobody has ever said zero trust security to you before, if any of the things on those last 2 slides you looked at and go, I have no idea what that dude is talking about, you need to make a phone call and talk to a qualified IT organization. These are the things that if you aren't doing them, there will be very little sympathy for your organization. This isn't the gold standard. This is the base standard. you need to be meeting the NIST framework. You need to have zero trust security principles implemented in your organization. If you're not there, you're at risk. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're at risk. I just can't drive it home enough because I spend too much time, and I know you do too, Anthony, with business owners that are devastated. I've never seen more fully grown adults look just heartbroken, like a child you just stole a teddy bear from, than I see when I deal with companies that have experienced a breach. All their aspirations for growth for the year go out the window. They know they're going to be bogged down for 18 months dealing with the recovery, just reputationally alone, not to mention the cost and the disruption. It's heartbreaking for business owners. Don't be one of those people. Focus on this problem. All right. And so with that, Laurie, I don't know if you want to wrap up with any questions you've got for Anthony or I, but we can't thank you all enough for taking time out of your day to listen to an accountant and an IT guy. I don't know how you find a more exciting combo than that, but here we go.
Yeah, so what I loved about your presentation, Todd and Anthony, is that you started out by saying it's really difficult to attract workers. And then you built on it by saying, using and introducing all these tools, these productivity tools, that you're really not diminishing or cutting jobs. You're actually redeploying individuals within your organization to do higher level work so that you can be more productive and you can be better situated. And then you laid out a variety of resources and tools and ways that people can start to experiment with all of the applications and programs that are already baked into Microsoft 365, which, most of us probably have, we probably haven't really experimented as much as we should. So I think you sparked a good conversation with that. And I did have just one thought. I was listening, I was preparing for our annual meeting the other day when we had Secretary Gina Raimondo in, and I was thinking about the whole workforce piece that we've been talking about. And I came across some pronouncements from BlackRock's Larry Fink, and he said, in his view, that remote work is responsible for inflationary pressure because there's a drop in productivity. Now, I know he's biased to have everyone back at the office, but I'm just curious, either one of you have a take on that, because it seems, counterintuitive.
I know I have a strong opinion about it. We might actually be just juxtaposed, Anthony. What do you think?
No, I think at the end of the day, accountability is the key word. And if you have people working from home or working in an office setting, no matter where they're working, there has to be accountability from the standpoint of the employee. And you have to have good management that oversees and empowers those employees and holds them accountable.
You are the man. That was the word I was going to use, management. Laurie, I think I did a webinar with you guys right at the beginning of the pandemic around digital culture. And one of the things I had said was, I suspect that during the pandemic, we're going to see leaders of companies who were previously very successful managers struggling and maybe not being as successful in this new work model. We weren't all cut out to manage hybrid employees. And, I'm a technologist. I miss the mark from time to time. Fortunately, I got a lot of people around me who go, hey, dude, you missed the mark on that. I'm open to hearing them. But my experience with digital workforces is that for the most part, the bigger problem is that they'll work 24 hours a day sometimes. Because everything is so readily accessible in their living rooms and in their kitchens, people burn themselves out hard during the pandemic because they didn't know where to draw the line. And it used to be that drive home drew the line for us. When we walked in our door, we were in our homes and in our personal life. When we were in our office, we were in our professional life. That line went away. And, I think for some organizations, I do think that it is a lot easier to hide in a hybrid model. I think it's a lot easier, and there's always going to be in any population of employees, some small percent who are trying to get by doing the least that they can possibly do. That's just in any population of humans, period, right? But they're the exception, not the rule. my experience has always been that the vast majority of people want to do a great job. They want to over deliver. And, you got to draw boundaries to make sure they don't burn themselves out along the way. This all comes down to leadership and management. And part of that is having the right tools to be able to help people build that balance. So that's my thought, Laurie.
That's a great way to end. And I love the way you put it in the context of, this is all a new management competency that managers have to learn and to adapt and adopt to, because it's certainly not going away. And Anthony, I love the story that you shared about the Luddite potential um, client of yours, and the reaction among your staff about, hey, I can't work in this way. So I think it's very interesting, very instructive, and you tied it all together so beautifully. So thank you very much, everybody, for being with us. And we did promise that everyone will get a copy of the slides and the presentation, and also a copy of this whole program. Mike, our guru, will be posting it on YouTube, and we will again send it to each of you individually that registered for this, so that you can have access to it and refer to it at a later date. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and hope to see you next time. And so great you were here. Chamber episode number 182. Thanks.